Not in our backyard. You can't develop in our backyard. Please don't build in our backyard. We don't want anyone in our backyard. We want it for ourselves. Perhaps you can build in your own backyard. Perhaps you can build in your own backyard. Perhaps you can build in your own backyard. Then you won't spoil our view. We'd like to keep the town the same as it was. We'd like to keep the town the same as it was. We'd like to keep the town just as nifty as it was in 1950. But the industry is gone and the town's not the same. The industry is gone and the town's not the same. The industry is gone and the town's not the same. And by the way, equally for the trains. The jobs are gone and the town's nearly broke. The jobs are gone and the town's nearly broke. The jobs are gone and the town's nearly broke. And by the way, that's no joke. Some say, let's sell off rights to the town lands for a song. Some say, let's sell off town rights to lands for a song. Some say, let's sell off town rights to lands for a song. And the state will pay, as we hoped all along. Others say, to sell the rights under these conditions would be wrong. To sell the rights under these conditions would be wrong. To sell the rights under these conditions would be wrong. For reasons that are many, on a list that is long. Ralph Nader says, followers, please get involved if you can. Ralph Nader says, followers, please get involved if you can. Ralph Nader says, followers, please get involved if you can. Or it just might seem like you don't give a damn. A considered decision made by an elected majority. A considered decision was made by an elected majority. A considered decision was made by an elected majority. They decided to keep the rights to the land. The final public comment was as one-sided as we expected it to be. The final public comment was as one-sided as expected to be. The unhappy losers cried that the decision was wrong. They wanted to give the rights to the land away for a song.
Do any board members have any questions they'd like to ask?
Oh, sorry.
Blinded you?
Interrogation.
You are, but anyway, by better lighting. George?
Just a question on the, originally on the proposal, there was no public access on this. And is it correct that the DEP has requested some form of access, and this is where it came? It wasn't the land trust who changed. It was what the requirement of the DEP was?
That's right, George. The original grant, it did not include a requirement for public access, so we did not include that in our grant application. But since getting the grant, really said they want public access, and they actually are fine with a very limited guided hike at Crystal Lake. They understand the concerns about, letting people, drink water. And as for Highland Lake, I think letting people walk on it is sort of keeping the status quo. There's nothing stopping people, and I think people are getting in there now anyway.
Is there any questions from the board? Ken?
So do we need to do 2 votes tonight? One to allow public access and another to move this proposal forward?
We'd like you to do an up or down vote on the proposal as a whole that includes public access.
So it'll be 1 vote taking care of essentially two items. In the slide, as well as in your proposal, you said that the expenses are estimated. What would happen in the event that those expenses were to increase or even double? What would happen then?
Expenses are coming out of the funding, so that would mean that the town would get less money.
So I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. If the expenses, you have down here approximately $46,500, say they were $56,000, where would the extra $10,000 come from?
Grant.
We would net less money.
Less into fund balance itself.
Well, we could also do what we just did with Brownsfield in terms of, accepting the housing authorities. We put, the agreement contingent, contingent on the certain, well, for the housing authority contingent on a different, them getting a different grant. We could also make this contingent upon the expenses staying within this amount. We could do that, and it would move forward. And if the expenses were less, that's great. If they were more, then it couldn't continue.
That wasn't the answer that I got. I mean, I spoke to Kate Brown, and I asked her that specifically. If the expenses were more than what you had proposed, $46,000, and she told me that that was the absolute bottom line. I mean, they would only allow $46,500 for expenses. She told me that any cost overruns would have to come from the land trust itself.
That's not what our budget said.
I think what you're hearing, and probably to, because we're going to have to figure out how to move this along, is that maybe it would be contingent upon that. And if he's saying that he talked to Kate Brown at the DEP, and did you forward that response from her to us?
No, it was an email. It was just on the phone. She had called me back. I had sent her an email.
Right.
Well, I sent her an email, and I think she responded to you, and then you CC'd the mayor. So I never got an email back from Kate Brown. But she did call me back on the telephone. But that's fine. But she did call me back by phone. And during that phone conversation, I said to her, I said, well, on this resubmittal of this proposal, it says that these closing costs are estimates. And I specifically said to her, I said, well, the total estimate is approximately $46,500. I said, what if it's $50,000 or $60,000? And she says, they will not be allowed 1 more cent out of the grant fund. That will have to come from the Winchester Land Trust. Because as you know, as everyone knows now, the town cannot pay this, any of the closing costs, per our ordinance. So with that being the case, is the Winchester Land Trust, are they solvent enough? Do they have funds to cover any overages that may occur in this?
The Winchester Land Trust is contributing our hundreds of hours of volunteer time, and we're also bringing this grant to the town, and that's our contribution.
So is that a no?
That's a no.
Okay. All right, thank you.
George?
The estimates of these expenses, how did you come up with these numbers?
We talked to John DeCara about how much the surveying would cost, and he gave us a rough estimate this is only the Crystal Lake portion we're talking about, because Highland Lake Watershed Association has said they'll pay up to $10,000 for the surveying on the other, on Highland Lake parcels. So we did talk to a surveyor. We talked to an appraiser, and we got an estimate of the $9,500 from the appraiser. And we talked to our own lawyer about the legal costs. We don't know what the town is going to, we don't know what your legal costs are going to be. Maybe you want to get an estimate of that, but ours are going to be less than half of the $10,000. So we kept that as estimate at $10,000, hoping that that will cover it.
Since these are fees coming out of the land trust, is it possible to get legal fees donated with a tax benefit to the donor?
That's not the estimate we got.
No, I didn't say that. But if you had an estimate of whatever it was, and you happen to have somebody who had an interest in promoting the success of this, would that be possible?
Our lawyers haven't offered to donate, and I don't know that we would ask them.
They may still count it as money for in-kind service.
I mean, they already charge us very low.
Okay, no, I'm just.
Ken?
Has anyone asked the town attorney how we're going to handle the stewardship fee? Because I believe that we aren't allowed to, the board that is, allowed to give out more than $15,000. So would that be a separate vote to cover that stewardship fee?
I have an idea. I'm just going to guess. We could actually, it would be built into the budget. You can build it into the upcoming budget.
Okay. Well, that's, I think, how you would do it.
Right.
Maybe built in for the first year and then spread out. Because if you put
Almost like a
$400,000 into the bank and you earned, 1% or 2%, you'd probably cover years 2 through 8. You may not cover that first year fully, but the interest earned, and if things went up on a conservative estimate of 3 to 4%, increase on that would cover those fees. So it wouldn't actually even be coming out of the current dollars that we would get, but it would be interest, and then if the interest was above that, then the town would be able to add to the money that was in there into that account. And even though we can't commit future boards, to follow our intent, I know my intent is that money would always sit there and that we would not use it for projects in town, and that it would become a stability fund for us to use when it comes to November. And instead of arguing about TANs in town, at least there would be a stability there within our fund balance that we can start to, move forward with and, get that doubled, and to be able to start looking, down the road, because it's clear, when you look at all of the things that we need to do in town, that without some future bonding for infrastructure, for equipment, for, where we are in terms of buildings, especially on the school side, we're talking about taking snow off roofs so they don't collapse. Well, if we're talking about that, then we seriously need to look at infrastructure a little bit more than we currently do. I think it's important that when that time comes, that you have to have, a fund balance that is growing, not staying stagnant. And I think that in this proposal, it keeps everything as it is now. I think it's been well thought out. It may not be perfect to some people, and I think that, all the questions that people had have been answered by them. So I would think that our next step is in the sale of town-owned land, which would be, we would just continue, the Board of Selectmen would vote to continue the process, to move it forward, which I believe is notifying land abutters and those steps. And then from there, it would not be our decision anyway. The decision would be the town.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's all, I agree with you. I wanted to do that with the Blue Cross money many years ago, okay?
Yes.
I most certainly
You
did.
should have listened.
And that didn't happen. So I love the idea. Unfortunately, we don't have any control where the money's going to go. I like the idea. It would, if the stewardship would be a line item, like any debt that administration we carry until we no longer owe that debt. Having said that, my concern are two things. And I've listened to all the, and believe me, I like this, and then there's certain things I just don't like. I'm concerned about the expenses, because basically what you're saying, Shelley, is that in the event that these exceed your estimated amounts, that it's going to be a net reduction to what comes to the town of Winchester. Is that correct?
Yeah, we want to be clear about that.
Okay. That's number one. And the fact that Kate Brown is saying that you cannot exceed your estimated amounts, and I do see in your proposal where you put estimate. Doesn't mean Kate Brown saw it, though, unfortunately. So I'd like to know whether that is the case or not. Secondly, I have to tell you, I have issues, and I know that there's a lot of land around Crystal Lake, and I still have issues adding another layer of bureaucracy to water and sewer, or having people walk on there. I mean, 9/11 came, scared the heck out of all of us, and there was all kinds of hullabaloo for a long time where people were trying to put stuff in drinking water. I don't like it. I don't like the access part of that. I really, I understand the parcels up at, and I understand wanting to have those parcels up at Highland Lake. I don't like the access part on Crystal.
Access for, what's one day guided.
I don't care. It's one day too many.
George?
Well, first of all, I think that the expenses, you did the research on it. It wasn't sitting at a table just guessing at it. And I think that when you're dealing with the surveyor, and again, it's that you're talking about this money is going into local contractors, which I think is wonderful. You're not bringing them in from somewhere else, so it's money coming into our community. But I think that there's... First of all, if the grant wasn't even available, and the land trust didn't go through the extensive time and the expertise that was used to write the grant, and then be successful in getting $500,000 or $450,000 for this, we wouldn't even be talking about. I mean, we're talking about a lot of money coming in here that we wouldn't have, and it would almost double our fund balance at this point. So if it tweaks $5,000 one way or another, it's a huge amount of money that's coming into the community, with basically providing protection for the property we should be protecting anyways. I don't see a downside to that, frankly, and I think that we as a community and a board of selectmen should be standing up and taking every action that we can to make sure we answer all the questions that are necessary so we get this grant, not figure out how many places we can put stumbling blocks in front of us. So I really, I wish there were more organizations would come forward with plans like this, because they're not coming out of the taxpayer. And I don't see what the downside would be. I too think about the, the access, but, I printed out off the one of the survey maps, and I know years and years ago, there's an old road that goes alongside of where the Ruddy's home is, and it goes up through to the mountain. And I remember we came in from the dry dam part of this on the Route 44 side, and we hiked up over. Of course, the trees are a lot bigger now, there's pines and so forth, and that was a beautiful hike. And if maybe that's something the Sewer and Water Commission would possibly select as that kind of a route, where you don't have any other, you don't cut trails and so on and so forth. It's just a thought. But the fund balance is a huge issue. We had $1.2 million years ago, and we're down to 3-something. We've got a lot of problems that we don't know exactly where we are with the Board of Ed, and I think that this will help us, give us a little bit of a cushion. I don't know. I'm definitely in favor of it, and I think we should approve this. The concept of it, the details of the easement, the attorneys have to work out, because we definitely cannot interfere with the operation, the continuing operation of the water works. And from what Jen said, they would supersede anything that would take place in the easement language anyways, but the language has got to be worked out within the, with the lawyers, and it's not something, I don't think our board is qualified to be talking about each and every little issue. So I think if we can approve the concept of what this is, that it's your description of what this is and the terminology in the easement, let the lawyers take care of it. And I think this has to go through Planning and Zoning, 824 referral?
Well, that's one of the steps.
The steps in it, okay.
Mike, then Lisa?
I'm in agreement with George. I'm totally in favor of this. I think that we shouldn't be trying to find ways to, put stumbling blocks. We should be trying to find ways to make sure that everything's in order. And, whether it's $403,000 that we get in the coffers or $398,000 or $350,000, I think it's a great deal. And this idea that the 9/11 terrorists, are we really, we think somebody's going to poison the water with one guided tour a year? I don't care if there's 10 guided tours a year. That's a nonsensical argument.
Only takes once.
Like we're a target in Winsted, really. But in any case, it's a nonsensical argument. I'm going to be voting in favor of this. I suggest that I'd like to make a motion to move the question and vote on the proposal as proposed.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to move the question. If you vote in favor of this, that means there'll be no more discussion, and we'll just vote to move it to the next step in the sale of land ordinance. This will not be a move. This is just to end debate on the question. If you want to keep talking about it before we make the motion to move it on the town ordinance scale, then you would vote no. Okay, but we can't discuss it at all. We can only discuss moving the question. So I'm just clarifying what moving the question means. Okay.
Are we moving the question, or are we making the motion?
Moving the question.
Oh.
You made a motion to move the
I didn't even know
question.
the first motion was made.
Yeah, to move the question.
Move the question.
Make a motion to move the
There
question.
wasn't a question on the table.
Was there a motion on the table? Because I
No,
don't
there
recall a
wasn't.
motion even being on the
So then you
table.
want to end debate. You want to make a motion to end debate.
End debate and then make a motion to...
You can't do two in a row. You
Yes.
can't do two in a
No,
row.
you can't do two in a row.
You can only do one. All right, so you're making a motion to end debate?
Fine.
Is there a
I've got-
second?
Yes, George seconded.
I second.
Second. Okay. All in favor of ending debate on the issue? Those that like to continue it? Yeah, I'll abstain.
I have a suggestion. Why doesn't somebody make a motion so we can discuss it, and then somebody can move the question if they so want to? So if you'd like to make a motion on this, and then somebody second it, then we can discuss this a little further, and if you want to move the question after that, then we can do that.
All right, well, I mean, let's not, let's just...
No, I just,
I know,
let's
but
just put it in order.
let's just discuss this. We've been doing a good job discussing it. Let's keep going. Lisa, you had a question, and I'm going to ask Lisa for her question before I go to any motions or accept any.
Okay. One of my concerns is that if this sale is approved by this board, the funds of this sale would be deposited into the town's general fund. Given the reckless spending habits of the Winchester Board of Education, like George addressed, and the already estimated $800,000 deficit, these funds would potentially be erased with zero benefit being recognized by the town for the sale of one of its greatest assets. So I guess that's my problem too, is I want to increase our fund balance, but I would like the town side to see some benefit from it. And I don't think that's going to happen until we get the overspend that continues in the Board of Education under control.
George?
Well, with regards to that, if we had a zero fund balance and we continued to have the overspend, you got a supplemental tax.
You're right.
Okay, so is this, if our fund balance is higher than what it is right now, and we have some overspends, it's going to reduce the potential for a supplemental tax, the amount. So no matter what, we're still in a better position from the taxpayer standpoint to get as much of the fund balance in. And we're not selling the land. We own the land. For instance, when the dam, the flow management procedures came up and they were talking about it from the DEP, my thought was, who are the big players in the state of Connecticut that are probably behind some of this, because that's going to be a very expensive proposition for the waterworks? It's probably Aquarian and MDC. So if something happens and this community wants to go ahead and do something with those types of water works, there's still that potential, because you're not selling the land. We're selling only the conservation easement. That's all we're doing. So I think we still retain a huge value here.
And I would just, if this grant's not going to come again, there's not going to be somebody that's going to come into town and say, I'm going to give you $350,000 for an easement on your property, and you don't have to do anything else different with it. There's nobody out there offering us money for that or any of the other parcels at the moment that I can see. So if we don't take the money and if we don't do this and don't put the money in, we won't increase fund balance. Last year, because of the financial management on the town side, $200,000 or so went into fund balance. Yes, it was quickly erased by the Board of Ed. One of the tools that we have with the Board of Ed this year that we did not have last year because of the MBR and the way that things were structured legally. Last year, legally, we had put in the money in the Board of Ed budget for them to spend, and our problem was on our revenue side from the ECS funds. In this year's current budget, that has been corrected, so that the Board of Ed legal amount to spend, they cannot exceed it. It will not be compromised by a revenue that we know of, because the ECS is funded as it is, and we had planned for it. If the Board of Ed overspends this time, we have tools at our disposal in terms of charter section, I think, was it 902 or 903, plus we have the State Board of Education's, the statutes that say this Board of Ed cannot overspend. It's different than it was last year, and we can hold them accountable in this current year because the number that they have is the real number, and it takes into account whatever revenue loss there was. So there is a tool for the Board of Ed that I don't believe that they may through mismanagement and they may through negligence overspend this budget, and their negligence will be not to have all of those policies in place, and they have the charter section for that. And so, I'm not worried about the Board of Ed taking this money that comes from this source as much as I am of having a source that stabilizes the funds of the town with a piece of property that is currently filtering water for drinking and will continue to do it in perpetuity. And that's the difference that I see.
Would we, as a town, have any legal authority in the future land use considerations for the properties that the easement's on?
Future land consideration, once an easement's on it, there, other than the Board of Health and the water company doing what was outlined on the board, I don't believe there's anything else.
Well, generally, the landowner reserves rights in the easement. So yes, the town would certainly have a role in taking care of the land, and, we see this as a partnership. I mean, we want this to work. We want the town to be able to do what it needs to do with the property while we are doing our responsibilities with the easement.
But we as a town wouldn't be able to go up there and build development. We couldn't build a school up there. In all likelihood, we couldn't build anything up there.
And you just couldn't do that, or you would have to go through the land trust to ask?
That kind of development would be one of the things that would not be allowed under the easement.
But then again, we would want, where in our future, if we're worried about a terrorist going in and polluting the drinking water, we would not build anything on those lands that were up on the map, because you want that to remain drinking water. I mean, just like all the other wetlands that we protect and people protect, in their own ways, through their own donations to land trusts or their own buying of land that they put easements on now. I mean, right now we have large parcels of land under, the 429 forestry land state statute, where there's large tracts of land that pay very low taxes on it because of the 429 forestry registration, and many private owners do that to protect the land, right? And this is just an extension, in a public way of that. Plus, one of the blogs I read, it was rather interesting. They said, why is the state going to give them money to protect something they already protect? And so somebody questioned from that side of view, why are we going to get bonus money to do something we're already kind of doing? or will want to do in the future. And that's part of what I see as well, is that this land will continue to protect our drinking water, as it has for hundreds of years at this point in time. We'll continue to protect not only our drinking water, but we'll continue to protect Highland Lake, because the drinking water, when it overflows, comes down through Highland Lake, which will continue to protect the Mad River, which will continue to protect the Still, which will continue to protect the Farmington.
I just want to clarify my earlier position. When I asked Shelley to clarify the net reduction, what I was saying is that according to the conversation, at least if I understand it correctly, Ken, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're saying that Kate Brown from the Department of Environmental Protection said that in the event that these expenses exceed what is on this proposal, that they will have to eat that, because they have to give $403,000 or whatever it was to the town. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
That's what I'm
She said
trying
they're
to
dealing
say.
with 20, I think, recipients, and they will not give one more penny in expenses to the town of Winchester exceeding $46,500. She said it will have to come from the land trust.
They just approved a budget where we asked for $46,000 more in expenses from the grant. And so I can't help but believe that there's a process for exceeding that amount by $2,000 if necessary. But I will certainly clarify that with Kate.
That's all I'm
I
saying.
heard that from her.
Right.
I wasn't mentioning a net reduction.
Perhaps we can have this in writing from Kate, so that all of us know clearly where it is. But I think that we can still continue to move this process along and get that answer, because we're not voting tonight to move it to the public meeting. We're just voting to continue the process that we have for the sale of land. And I would go out on a limb, and Shelley, you might not want to hear this, but if your estimates are correct, I would go out on a limb that, we would make it contingent upon those expenses, and my guess is that we would be fine. My guess is,
Who just made that decision? Because it says discussion possible action regarding the Winchester Land Trust proposal. It was under
made what decision?
that we weren't going to vote tonight, whether to move this forward.
No, by the ordinance, the town-owned land, we don't move it to the public yet, to a town meeting. We move it along with the sale of town-owned land to, I think, step 4.
But it has to get through the Board of Selectmen first before we go to that next step.
Right, and that's what she was alluding to.
That's what I'm
the mayor was
saying.
alluding to, right.
Is that we would move it along the steps, not straight out to the public. So I am following the right steps, I believe. Right?
I'm just going to weigh in real briefly. I've given this a lot of thought, and when I started taking a look at the issue, it made sense for me to be party to move it along. But I think that what this board needs to take into consideration is that that money, it's a big number, but it's seductive, because you are making a big decision for future boards and what could happen and what may need to happen up on that property. And I'm in agreement. I told Shelley this. I don't think anybody should be anywhere near the drinking water land as far as guided tours. I have a problem with that. And, that's all I have to say.
Mike, would you like to make your motion now?
I'd like to make a motion to pass along the proposal to the next step as presented.
Second.
Any more discussion on it? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay. It's a 4-3, it fails. 13 is public comment. If there's anybody who'd like to make public comment. One at a time, please.
Dick Leonard, 418 East Wakefield. As I understand it now, the grant is dead.
Well, I would assume so, unless you can get one of the 4 people that voted no to reconsider their position going forward to bring it back to the agenda.
Or if, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, or if they modify the proposal in some way, because my motion was as proposed. So if they modify it and repropose it, then.
And the question I have, what's the modification that has to be made?
I would.
Well, we don't have an answer for that right now. I mean, you heard some of the concerns that people made, and I think that some of those concerns will continue to bother people, I suppose, until you take out the major sources I heard were that nobody wants anybody to go on the property, so perhaps if that was taken out, but I'm not sure if other concerns would pop up.
Right now, you have no policing in this town at all for the town property you own. The person that's responsible for that is a part-time person that's also the town planner. And right now, we've got ATVs running all over Suckerbrook Dam, destroying property there. There's nobody. What you had a proposal here, not only to bring $400,000, you had a proposal that suddenly somebody's going to start taking care of the town land that is just sitting there. I can't believe that you turned this thing down. I have never heard anything more ridiculous. If you had an opportunity to put, if you were a terrorist, you wanted to put something into the water, you wouldn't do it in the middle of a day or a hike. You do it in the middle of the night, it could happen, and we have no way to protect it. There's nothing in this proposal that would cause that to be a new problem for the water company. I just can't understand. Most towns have an open space program that they're pouring money into it. They're buying open space. Here's a chance we have to get $400,000 and get open space to protect Highland Lake, to protect the property, and you've turned it down. I'm appalled. I really am.
You choose. I don't know who wants to go first.
Rosemary Fraunhofer, 602 West Wakefield Boulevard. I look at an organization that's worked in concert with many other volunteer organizations in Winsted, and as far as I know, they've never had a black mark against them. They've never had any kind of poor track record. I think that 4 elected officials have voted against this, which actually deprives the entire town of Winsted from going to a town meeting to decide whether or not to pour over $400,000 into the town's coffers and protect land that right now is not protected. All of this run by an organization with over 20-year great track record. I just don't understand those 4 folks. I hope that people will sleep on it and really reconsider if that's at all possible. I just don't understand it. I agree with Mr. Levick. Thank you.
Jay Martin, 22 Pratt Street. I'm also with the Winchester Land Trust, but also just concerned about, would like to address the concern of those board members who expressed, I guess, dissatisfaction with the proposal for limited access 1 day a year because of potential exposure of the drinking water supply. There's room around that property. Again, the road was mentioned, dividing the reservoir from another portion of the property that showed on the map, which is far removed from the reservoir. That could be a portion from the height. But the principal thing is, as mentioned, that there's currently no surveillance of the property. There is a fence separating it from Route 263, but it's literally an arm's throw away from a public highway, just as the Barkhamsted Reservoir is an arm's throw away from Route 318. There's traffic by both of these bottoms of the drinking water supplies day in, day out, nighttime. And again, the probability or the likelihood of anything happening during 1 day per year, guiding height relative to if it's a concern of a terrorist threat or intentional contamination of the water supply happening via surreptitious activity, again, because it directly borders a public thoroughfare, is just seems beyond belief.
Louise Van Alstyne, O Street. I'm part of the Land Trust. We're very disappointed
disappointed that this vote was taken this way. To bring $450,000 to northwestern Connecticut was a wonderful thing for the whole town. And as you heard from Shelley and Jen, we worked with people who are locally, John DeCara, our appraisers. Our hope was to work with the town and to bring in as much funding as we could and do something that is already taking place, protect land and water. I'm a Winsted resident. It's very important to me. It's also important to know that the public access was never part of what the Land Trust wanted to do. That occurred after we got the grant in process, and the DEP is the ones who insisted on the public access, not the Land Trust. So I think that's an important part to remember. But it's just very disappointing that we tried very hard to do something that we felt would benefit everybody in town, bringing money and protection to a really great town that really needs to grow. So thank you for those of you who did support us. Perhaps we'll do something better next time. But thank you.
For the record, Jim Rollins, Reaching Hill Road. I'm a little surprised that the vote went the way it did. I understand the positions of those that voted for it and against it. Mrs. Smith, I'm worried about squandering the opportunity. It's a legitimate concern. I do think the public access issue is kind of a red herring. If somebody was going to try to contaminate the water source, it could just as easily be the Winchester Reservoir as any other reservoir in the country or the world for that matter. So we're not immune to it, but we need to, nothing is risk-free. If somebody wanted to contaminate that water source, it could be done whether we had public access or not. So I really think it's my position that that's maybe should be reconsidered by those that thought that was a deciding factor. I'm also on the board of the Wetlands Commission, and on my 9 years on that board, I've learned how important it is to keep the surrounding area to a water body as pristine as you can for water quality. And water is quickly becoming the single biggest issue around the world, not so much in New England, but around the world. And we have a great water system, we have great resources, we have great protections. And I think, yeah, this might add a layer of bureaucracy to what the Water Commission can do. But it's not insurmountable, it's not even that difficult. And I think the rational thought would be to really look at what was presented as a whole. I don't know if they're going to squander the money. Somebody might. Somebody probably will at some point. Maybe it could be conditioned such that this money is put into a fund, a designated fund that wasn't accessible to somebody that was mismanaging things. Just an option. I don't know if that's even available or possible. There seems like there has to be a way to find consensus among you to bring some money into the equation. And it just seems like you've got to be able to find a way. Yeah, I think the word seductive was the word. And you do have to take yourself away from the fact that this is just some big dollars, and don't let that cloud your thinking. If you thought about this as $20,000, you should still make the same decision, because I think the decision that should be made, even if it was a $20,000 amount, would be to take it, because it adds a layer of protection. I don't think the burden of the bureaucracy is such that it impedes the future value of the property. So I think the seductive part of the money shouldn't really be the equation. I think it should have been approved that this move on. And those of you that don't, I hope that you'll at least think about the comments that were made and maybe reconsider if that's possible. That's all.
I'm Jen Perga. I'd like to read a couple of goals from some drafts that were written for the POCD. The first one is referring to some of our watershed land, and it says, portions of these resources do benefit from permanent protection, but the large areas do not. This was from a draft from December 5th, 2009. This one states a goal of our open space plan for the POCD to provide permanent protection for the major town-owned lands, i.e. the water company lands. This one's from the Conservation Commission, and it states a goal that we should open up town-owned watershed lands to hiking trails and small-scale hiking to introduce our citizen to the beauty and diversity of our watershed resources. That one's from 1/11/09. These were all written by James Roberts, who's been an opponent of the land trust, and these ideas were all his.
Hi, Sue Clausen. I'm speaking as a resident of the town of Winsted and also taxpayer. My biggest disappointment tonight was because in the past there has been a lot of misinformation that's been passed around. There's been misrepresentation of facts. But really what disappointed me tonight was that the taxpayers of this town were denied the opportunity to decide whether they wanted this proposal or not. And 4 of you who voted against it denied the taxpayers that opportunity.
Shame on you.
Is there anybody else? Anybody else before Jim that wants to speak? Jim? Yeah, Mike.
Just a quick addition to what I said. As far as the public access goes, just recently I went on a guided tour through the MPC property. It was, they just got some buses, they brought us on a historical tour through it. When you see, they didn't seem to have any problems with it. They had so much demand that they actually had a second bus late in the game, and everything went off without a hitch. We were so happy to see the news and learn that they correctly. It was a good event that it's something to reconsider.
Hey, Mike?
Yeah, I just, Mike Ronzullo, 87 Wetmore. I'm also kind of flabbergasted at the results of the vote, and I would suggest that, well, first of all, whether or not the Board of Education squanders money has nothing to do with it. They're two separate things, first of all. Second of all, if we wanted to put the money somewhere else, certainly we could. We could make a sinking fund for infrastructure improvements, a fire department, whatever we wanted to do, we could put it someplace else. Third of all, the argument that somebody's going to poison the water supply is straight nonsense. This goes way back. This reminds me of like the color-coded red. Oh, it's a high alert day. You know, like, I mean, stop watching Fox News. You know, show me one situation anywhere in the country where a reservoir has been poisoned. Show me anywhere. Has that even happened anywhere? Give me a break. This should absolutely have gone through, and I would encourage the Winchester Land Trust to modify the proposal in some minor way, and I'll see if we can't get some rational thought between now and then.
Is there anyone else? George?
I think some of these decisions that are made here, I mean, we're all very serious about what we do for the people we represent. And I think some of these things, and I think that Susan said this about having the townspeople in a referendum have the final opportunity. And I think that it's our responsibility to do the due diligence to bring the information out and research this stuff and put all this information forward. But I think ultimately, I would hope that if this can come back in some other form or fashion, that we at least as a commission, Board of Selectmen, give it to the town to vote it up or down. I think it's that important to us. This is an opportunity to get funding that we don't have resources other than taxation. And I just hope it somehow can get reconsidered.
Karen?
Yeah, I'm going to say something. You know, Mike, it doesn't help when you hurl insults about Fox News, because I don't actually watch any news. So I'm going to assume that was brought to the fore naysayers. Having said that, this was not an easy decision, was not made lightly. There were some questions that came up. The public access, no matter how ridiculous you may think it sounds, it's a
Well, let's not fight.
it's a concern.
Just
and I do speak for constituents, and I believe it's their concern as well. All right, so I don't like the disrespect. Secondly, I don't know if anybody would try to poison the water. Whether it would happen on a tour, I don't know. But it is a concern, all right? Is it a huge concern? No, but it's always out there. That has nothing to do with the layer of bureaucracy that we're adding, or the fact that we're actually,
Again, not an issue.
No, this is a
or the
public
fact that we are giving our rights to another layer of people when we have the water, we have ourselves, we have the water and sewer company, we have the town, and then we have the, I don't know what's going to happen. They've been here 20 years. They're a great group of people. They do a really good job. But they're, you know what? We've had conversations in the past, in September, about properties that had issues. Am I not remembering this correctly? You know, that we were worried, how are they going to monitor 900 and something acres? You know, it is a lot of responsibility. I give them a lot of credit for doing this. I made this decision. It was not easy. If it could be modified, and I wanted to know. I still want to know if Kate Brown is telling the truth. I'm not worried about getting $15,000 less. I want to know if they have to spend $15,000 more that they can't afford. They made it sound like they can't afford that would put them and make them insolvent. I do not want to go into business with people that may be insolvent, and we're going to give them a conservation easement. I want these questions answered. So if we can get these answered, I'd be happy to revisit this, okay? And I appreciate all of I'm listening to every one of you. But this is something that is very serious. We have sold property in this town in the past and have regretted it. Okay? I'm trying to look at the history of this and to see where it's going to go in the future. $300,000 or $400,000? You're right. Glenn's right. It's very seductive because we are in such a financial crunch. I just want to make sure what we're doing is the right thing for the future. Not for now, because we need $400,000, or for 5 years down the road. I want to make sure this is the right fit. That's all. Thank you.
So Karen, would you like Paul to get an official?
I would like more
Is
information,
that way it'll be
yes.
from an official members of the board, and the consensus will be from all of us?
Yes.
Yes.
I see I need to clarify something. When I said that the land trust was going to, contribute volunteer hours in the bringing of the grant, I wasn't intending to say that the land trust is insolvent. That's something I rebutted before. It's not the case. You might remember that our original proposal was that we would pay our expenses and the town would pay its expenses. So at one time, we were prepared to pay the expense of our own expenses. However, once it became apparent that the town could not pay its own expenses, we went back to see if it could come out of the grant. And if your expenses can come out of the grant, we feel that our expenses can also come out of the grant, since we're doing all the work here. So, no, my answer to the question was not that the land trust can't afford it, is that we're not willing to undertake those expenses. We've been here 5 times. It's been a lot of work. It's been a really long road. If you think it's worth us making a minor correction or minor adjustment to the proposal, we'll give it another try. But we're all volunteers, and nobody here is profiting from this in any way. We just really wanted to do something good for the town. That's something that the town has put in its goals, in its plan of conservation and development anyway. I mean, you might want to consider donating an easement to the land trust, because that is something that would further those goals. we went above and beyond to bring in funding for it. So let me know if you want us to come back yet again.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Yeah, might as well throw For the record, Fran Delaney, 607 West Wakefield Boulevard. Two specific comments. I find Selectman Lisa Smith's comment or objection the most curious one, because if we use that rationale, we would never accept anything positive for the town because someone might spend the money. So how can we ever do anything that we're looking out for the town's best interest if we're fearful that someone's going to use that money for something we don't like? The reason we raise the money, or the town has the money, is to cover these expenses, good, bad, or indifferent, that the town incurs. So the last rationale for objecting to something ought to be that we're going to get money for it. I have an equal concern about any rationale that we shouldn't have this happen because someone might go on the land because there's limited public access and contaminate the reservoir or the drinking water supply. Point in fact is anyone could go up there anytime. So why are you not losing sleep about it right now?
I'll let you finish.
Well, I just don't know. It's just an open question, because anyone could go there anytime. To me, if anything, by adding a layer of bureaucracy that you're concerned about, you're adding a layer of protection, and you're giving yourself another opportunity to head things off, because anyone can cut the fence or climb over it anytime. So that argument to me is just equally invalid, because it could happen. And having another layer of protection to me helps that, doesn't damage that. I think you should rethink your rationale and think about it. Thank you very much.
Mike Clement, East Wakefield Boulevard. The way I see this, it's just a little squabble, or a big squabble, that has to do with Washington James, Mr. Fracasso, probably some of the old guys who aren't here, but here with us in spirit. And it's just like, they have the new land trust, there's the old land trust, and they're dividing. There's trouble, you know, it's just not working out. It seems like there's a lot of infighting going on. And it's a sad thing that this money's being lost. Ms. Smith's comment is so specious that I can't comment on. Ms. Beadle, are you really worried about terrorists? Are you really?
You know,
Okay.
no, I'm sorry.
You're not worried?
My apologies.
Okay, no worries. And you don't watch the news? You said you didn't watch the news.
Excuse me, just make your comments, please
My comment also
don't.
then is, Mr. Albanese, I'm surprised at you because you said up until tonight you thought about it long and hard and you were going for this. I'm not sure what did you, I'm curious, what you heard tonight that changed your mind?
Well, but he doesn't have to,
I'm
answer
just
it.
curious that you guys looking a gift horse in the mouth, and it is the infighting between different fractions. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no one else, we're going to move on.